My mother-in-law insisted on doing a DNA test on my baby because it is darker, but dug up shady and ruined her marriage. I need to vent about something that has been eating me up. My mother-in-law has always been a little overbearing, but this time she crossed the line. My husband and I recently had a baby. We have been together 6 years, married for 3. We have always had a strong, loving relationship. And our little blessing, our daughter, was a dream come true. We were happy when she was born, and I never expected anything to cloud this happiness. Then my mother-in-law walked in. She was still drowsy from the medication and trauma of childbirth, and my husband was tucking the baby into sleep when my mother-in-law walked into the hospital room. The first sentence I heard from her was, "Whose baby is you?" Carrying her question stunned me. My husband said it was our baby he was holding. She said, "So why is she black?" My husband and I were so shocked. My husband looked at me. We were not sure why this question came up in her head. I replied that black skin color runs in my family. Maybe that is why she picked up the genes from her maternal family. But she ignored me, saying what nonsense. She refused to understand. Genetics was determined to assert that if my husband and I have brown skin, how could my daughter be black? My mother-in-law has always been a difficult person. She is the type who wants everything done her way, and does not hesitate to criticize when things do not meet her standards. Over the years, I have learned to deal with her behavior, but this time, she went too far. I was furious at her comments. How could she insinuate that I had been unfaithful to my husband? I was already in too much pain and anxiety to bear her toxicity. I asked her if she meant that I was cheating on my husband. She said, "Don't spell it out. I am just listing the facts, but if you want to confess, go ahead." I stared at my husband, and he led her away, saying we should discuss this later. It's time for mom and baby to rest. He came back to my bed and assured me not to be bothered by my mother-in-law's nasty comments. We thought she was just evil, as she couldn't stand my happiness and chose to ruin it with these comments. I let it go, because we weren't that close to my in-laws. He visited me again the next day. Coincidentally, the doctor on duty was in the room for the checkup when he was leaving. My mother-in-law asked him if there was any chance that the baby had been replaced because it was black while we were brown. I was dumbfounded by his behavior. The doctor laughed and said that this was the same baby that had been taken out of inside me, and also that it was too early to determine the skin color of the baby. It takes 4 to 6 months to be Nod's skin color. She left the room along with the doctor, and never saw me or the baby again. She lives far from our place, which is a huge relief. But every time we meet her at social gatherings, she makes sure to poison her with her snide comments about my baby's skin color. When my baby was about 360 months old, we got an invitation to my brother-in-law's son's birthday. It was the first event for our daughter. We were super excited to take her to meet extended family members. She took it as an opportunity to publicly humiliate me. She allied herself with some toxic relatives, and they talked bad about my baby and me. One of them commented brown and brown. It should be brown or shades of brown and not black. It looks like someone mixed black in brown. It made me furious. They made this comment in front of to embarrass me. I interrupted. "Excuse me, what do you mean?" My mother-in-law said nothing. We were talking about colors, what you understood. You looked at each other and burst out laughing, making me feel uncomfortable. I left the event immediately. A couple of similar incidents followed. The only reason I let this go then was because I was busy raising my newborn, being a first-time mom. It was all too overwhelming for me, but now I guess it's time to act. The final straw was a week ago. My baby turned 6 months. Some of our friends came to celebrate this milestone with us. Suddenly, my mother-in-law showed up. I didn't want a confrontation in front of my friends, so I didn't say anything and welcomed her inside the house. She walks in and says, "The skin should have settled at 6 months. Let me see what you got." Everyone was stunned at her comment. One of my friends was holding the baby. She passed him to my mother-in-law. She looked at my baby. She exclaimed, "Oh, still black," and handed the baby back to my friend. I stood there in shock, unable to understanding what had just happened, and what I should say to save my face. I decided to hit her back since she had already started the show. My husband was in the kitchen, so I shouted her name and asked her to come. Aliera ran out, and I told her that her mother needed biology lessons because she clearly doesn't understand genetics. Or maybe she hasn't even attended school because only an illiterate can speak so much nonsense. My mother-in-law looked at my husband and whispered, "I didn't want to bring this up in front of everyone." She called him herself. I interrupted and told my husband about her sarcastic comments. She made a puppy face and said that no one would have understood it because it was too subtle. She said now that she has brought it up in front of everyone. Let me be clear. I demand a DNA test of the girl, or else she won't get the family name. I screamed at her to leave. My husband made it clear that he trusts me, and that there is no way we will do a DNA test on the girl. Even if the in-laws disinherit the girl, we don't give a damn. The thing is that even though my husband trusts and supports me, and I know that I will never, I have been unfaithful. I want to do the DNA test and throw the report in my mother-in-law's face, but part of me is holding back, thinking that I should not give in to my mother-in-law's demands and feed her ego. What do you think is the best way to put my mother-in-law in her place? Update 1. Thanks everyone for the suggestions. Getting some fresh perspectives helped me to some extent. I had the option to avoid the test and cut my mother-in-law out of our lives. We had already done that, but she was not going to shut her mouth. She was still going around talking nonsense about me and my baby. The best way to deal with this was to do the test and throw it at her like it has always been. Let me know when the reports come out month. We did the test, and as expected it came back to a 99.999% match with my husband. My husband called her and informed her that the report was ready and that she should come see it for herself. She came, but not. She was alone with her sisters, as evil as her. They entered the house, hugged my husband and said, "I am sorry, my child. I know it hurt. But it was important that the truth came out." My husband broke free and handed the envelope to my mother-in-law. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law's sisters gave me strange looks of, "Oh, you are still here." My mother-in-law opens the report and reads it. She stared at it for a good 5 minutes. I took the report out of her hands and asked her if she needed help to understand it, because it might be difficult for a 6th grader to understand the information. She said, "Wow, look at your confidence. You fake it." Right. My husband fell for her and said that we were done with her and that we did not want her in our lives anymore. She tried to manipulate my husband, but he asked her to leave and told her that we were cutting her off. She cried and left the house in a rage. Her sisters followed her with sour faces. But that was not all. I started an email with all the extended family members and close relatives whom my mother-in-law had poisoned regarding my daughter's paternity test, and sent them the DNA report. I described how my mother-in-law had been torturing me and accusing me of infidelity during my crucial postpartum period. Most of them responded with apologies and support. Ever since, my mother-in-law has kept a low profile and has not reappeared in our lives. My father-in-law also called me and apologized for not keeping my mother-in-law in check. But I had failed to keep the family together. He asked me if I could allow him to be in my baby's life. I told him I had a problem with him for not standing up for me and allowing him to slander me, but I understood that I did not want to ruin the peace in his house. So okay. I made it clear that I could see my mother-in-law, my baby, alone in my house, and under no circumstances would I share space with his toxic grandmother. He didn't say anything, but showed up a few days ago at my house with flowers and essentials for the baby to make up for the inconvenience caused. Some people need to be put in their place. My mother-in-law deserved it, and she brought it on herself. Update 2. Well, who knew there was much more to come? It seems my mother-in-law was projecting her own insecurities on me. After that email, many relatives on my father-in-law's side reached out to me to give me their support. They said they knew about my mother-in-law's evil. She had always been a narcissistic woman. Some hinted that she had a wild streak in her younger days, but no one said anything concrete. It was my father-in-law's sister who blurted out that my mother-in-law used to fool around with her neighbor. When my father-in-law was deployed in the military, she mentioned. Richard, a man who hadn't heard before. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more than met the eye. So I decided to dig a little deeper into his past, something I had never considered doing before. I wasn't prepared for what I found. I tried to sound out other relatives on my father-in-law's side, and some other people mentioned him according to them. Richard and my mother-in-law were very close, and there were rumors about the relationship, but nothing was confirmed. They are seen together at restaurants and malls. But she manipulated my father-in-law, and he remained in denial. I was still processing the information, and contemplating what to do about it, when there was another encounter with my mother-in-law. We went to attend the funeral of one of my husband's distant relatives. Upon seeing me, he made a loud comment. "Well, if you have legs to spread, you can fake any report. These men in the labs can tamper with any test report for a cheap thrill. So I don't trust these reports." He didn't explicitly mention my daughter's paternity test, but it was obvious he was bashing me by implying that I slept with a lab technician to manipulate the DNA report. I'm so sick of this woman. She doesn't care about being cut out of the baby's life. She is still her narcissistic self and is clinging to her accusations. I don't know how much truth there is in those rumors about the wild streaks of my mother-in-law. But it would be like winning the lottery if I could uncover the dirt on her past. The problem is that the rumor goes back 30 years. I don't know how to investigate that past. I would appreciate it if you could help me with any suggestions. I really need to do something about this toxic woman. Update 3. Well, thanks for the advice I received. Some really good ones. Hiring a private detective was one of the options I was considering. I was actually in contact with one of the agencies. When something else came up in the middle, my father-in-law came to invite us to his retirement party. I declined the invitation because I didn't want to share a space with my mother-in-law. He assured me that my mother-in-law feels guilty about her behavior and wants to work on the relationship with me. He insisted that I forgive and get together as a family. I told him what happened at the funeral the other day. He asked me if he could do something to change my mind. I told him that I would consider forgiving my mother-in-law if he was doing a paternity test on his children. My husband and father-in-law were confused by my demand. My father-in-law said he was sure both children were his. I told him my husband and I knew our baby was ours. However, we did the test to satisfy his wife's ego. So he had to do the test to be even. And he wanted to see his family together. Otherwise, we were happy to be alone. My husband tried to probe my reasoning, but I let him. Of course, my demand was non-negotiable. My father-in-law said, "Well, if that's what you really want, we can do it for you. There's nothing to lose, right?" I replied, "Well, I guess time will tell." My father-in-law and husband gave their samples the same day. I asked him to do the test for my sister-in-law as well. They called her, but she refused to give her sample, saying she was out of this nonsense. I did not keep my hopes up because the probability was very low, and if my husband was the son and my sister-in-law was not. Oh, and yes, my mother-in-law had had an affair, but she had never had a baby with her lover. However, she was determined to humiliate my mother-in-law one way or other. If this DNA test came out in favor of my mother-in-law, she would have planned something else for her. My suspicion became partially true even before the reports came out. When my father-in-law came home and told her about the paternity issue, she went crazy. He yelled at him for doing the test without her consent and insisted that he cancel it. Her reason was that she did not want to feed my ego. But this time she was unable to manipulate my father-in-law, and he noticed that I had a rat smell. He said he would not cancel it, and now he was waiting for the report. My mother-in-law called my husband and tried to emotionally manipulate him, saying, "You don't trust your mother." My husband replied, "Yes, I trust you, and I also trusted my wife. However, we did the test just to satisfy your ego. Let's accept it as a formality." She said, I was feeding my ego, and I should cancel it. My husband said, "What is the point of canceling? We have already paid for it and given the sample. Let's see the report and get this over with." Seeing her desperation, I understood that I had struck a nerve to divert everyone's attention. She acted sick, claiming that she slipped in the shower and broke her back and knees. Unfortunately, that went wrong for her, and she was bedridden. I went to see her and told her it's sad that they confined you to bed, otherwise you could have also spread your legs and manipulated the reports. She insulted me, and I laughed in her face. I knew what was coming. I don't know why she didn't confess and let my father-in-law find out through the report. As expected, there was a 0.9 relationship between my father-in-law and my husband, which meant that he was not the father I knew when the report would come out, and I was following it through the serial number. The day it was supposed to come out, I went to my mother-in-law's house to witness the drama in person. When I arrived, I gave the report to my father-in-law, who became furious, so he threw it in my mother-in-law's face. She pretended not to understand what it said. I picked it up and said, "It means my father-in-law is not the father of your child. I am not sure of the daughter." However, I laughed inside if there really is karma. This is how it should work. My mother-in-law acted like she fainted from pain. I called my husband and told him my mother-in-law had fainted, so he should come rushing home from work. He came and saw the report for himself. My father-in-law forced my mother-in-law to confess, but she kept denying, saying she didn't know how it came out, that she even blamed me for tampering with the report to get back at her. I told her, if you don't trust this hospital, you can have them tested in a couple more places to rule out the possibility of error or tampering. She didn't want to do it. She didn't accept the report. After a lot of back and forth, my father-in-law screamed, "What is it?" There was a deathly silence in the room. My mother-in-law burst into tears and said she would confess everything, but she wanted me to leave. I grabbed my purse and stood up. But my father-in-law said she is not going anywhere. You humiliated her in front of the world. Now she will stay right there. She started crying and confessed that she had been cheating with the neighbor Richard when my father-in-law was deployed. She said she was alone. My husband and father-in-law looked at her with horrified looks. My husband walked out. Furious, and I followed him. He just drove off without me. I came back home. My mission is accomplished. I waited for my husband until 10 p.m. before calling him. He declined the call and I gave him space. I fell asleep while putting my baby to sleep. I don't know when he got home. I held him while he slept. He whispered, "You knew, right?" I nodded with the head and hugged him tightly. The next morning, my husband had a fever and called in sick. He refused to get out of bed, saying he was having an existential crisis. I have made an appointment for his therapy. I hope that helps him accept his reality. Meanwhile, my father-in-law went to see my sister-in-law and showed her the report. She was furious too. She took the test, but it came out 99%. So she is my father-in-law's daughter, but my husband is Richard's. The thing is, no one knows where Richard is, not even my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law didn't even tell her that my husband was her son. Because he was a careless man, he could have created chaos in my mother-in-law's perfect family. So she quietly shut him out of her life at this point. I'm not sure if my husband even wants to reconcile with his biological dad. However, my father-in-law came to our house a couple days ago and broke down. Said he didn't know how. Having this conversation, I stood up to give them space to talk as father and son, but he insisted that I stay. To ease the awkwardness, I suggested maybe we could continue, as we are respecting and loving each other as human beings. If we don't want to give him a relationship label. My father-in-law said that he went to couples therapy with my mother-in-law, and there she confessed that she projected her insecurities on me since my daughter had black skin. She thought I had cheated on my husband like she had. Luckily, her cheating didn't come to light, because my husband inherited all the characteristics of my mother-in-law and not of Richard. I don't know how the relationship between my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my husband will shape from this point. But I feel satisfied to have discovered the truth behind my mother-in-law's mask. My father-in-law confided this trauma to his sister, the same one who gave me the clue about my mother-in-law's affair with Richard. She called me yesterday and applauded me for going above and beyond to uncover this truth. She said she had taken my mother-in-law down for both of us because my mother-in-law had always been cruel to her. It's just a matter of time before the whole family and relatives know the truth about her. When my mother-in-law was confessing, I felt bad for her. But when I saw the bigger picture, I think she asked for it. She could have kept silent like she had for years, instead of picking on me for the color of my baby's skin. She finished her own grave, and now she has to lay in it. Update 4. Well, we are facing a divorce, which is my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. For now, my husband wants to keep his father in his life, and also, we are going to have him around our daughter. He has considered him his father for all this time, and he doesn't see why he should change that now either. My husband wants to contact Richard since she doesn't see the point now. After so many years, we don't even know if he is alive or not. My mother-in-law is of course devastated because she never expected things to escalate this way. But she has asked for it, and that she had many moments to stop this and stop her nonsense. But she insisted until she brought out my vengeful side. She even had to insist a lot because I had just become a mother and I had no interest in all this drama, but she pressed the right buttons so that this truth would explode in her face. Of course you will see you mistake. It was not enough for her, and that is why I need to make myself the culprit of her failed marriage. Of course, opening her legs for the neighbor while her husband fought for the country was not the problem, it was me, but in her twisted head that I do not know what can have a lot of gray matter inside I do not believe, because she sees me as the villain. But no one but her does it, because even the family has already left her aside, even my husband does not speak to her, and my sister-in-law neither. But you know, when an animal finds itself cornered, it is more dangerous. So my mother-in-law tried something as a last resort a week ago. I began to notice that on social networks, there were fake accounts that left negative and offensive comments on my posts. At first I thought it could be a coincidence, but then I began to receive private messages full of insults and baseless accusations about my character and my relationship with my husband. These messages mentioned personal things that only someone close to the family could know. So a night I received a message from an anonymous profile that said, "Soon everyone will know the truth about you. You are nothing but an imposter and a manipulator. Your time will come." I realized that this was not just a casual attack from an internet troll. There was something more behind this. I decided to investigate, and I noticed that several of the profiles that attacked me were following the same accounts of friends and family. The most surprising thing was that one of these anonymous profiles was being followed by my mother-in-law. With this new suspicion, I confronted my mother-in-law directly. I called her and asked her if she knew anything about these attacks. She of course denied everything, saying that she had no idea what she was talking about, and that surely someone was trying to sow discord between us, but I knew. And even my husband knew that she had been creating fake profiles, thinking that no one would catch her with this evidence in hand. I organized a family meeting and presented all the information. My mother-in-law tried to again deny everything. But this time, the evidence was irrefutable. My husband, furious and hurt, told his mother that she had gone too far, and that from that moment on she was totally out of our lives. He warned her that if she continued to interfere, we would seek a restraining order. After that, no one talks to her, and my father-in-law has left the house until the divorce and the bandage are settled with her. This woman seems not to put an end to her nonsense because she still keeps trying to attack me. I don't know what she expects from all this, because it's not like attacking me is going to change the fact of her infidelity. My husband thinks she may have started to develop senile dementia or something like that, because before this whole episode she didn't have these behaviors. At least, not to this extreme. She should get attention probably. But now no one in the family wants to do it. I don't know if there will be someone on her side of the family who wants to help her. But at least that's not my problem. Update 5. Well, my husband's theory that she might have dementia is becoming more and more true. Because of what happened a few days ago, she came home. But she wasn't at her best. She was wearing dirty clothes and she wasn't presentable as to leave the house. She banged on the door and yelled things like, "You have a black lover, don't lie to me." We called the police and they came. But when they did a preliminary exam, they decided that the best thing to do was to take her to a place for her care, because she was clearly not completely in her right mind. Even when the police had arrived, she continued to say nonsense. She even went so far as to say that my daughter's father was Richard. I don't know if because Richard was a black man, or because simply in her head all the ideas had mixed up. I'm not going to deny that it made me feel a little sorry to see her like this. Although the things she said before still affect me, at least now she will receive treatment and she will also be away from me for a while. Saying that I feel sorry does not mean that I forgive her or anything like that. Nothing changes from the past with or without illness.